Give me a moment. Yes, I think that's working. New camera. Well, at least it's better than that blasted webcam. Hello. I have reached the time in my life where I can no longer pretend. I feel, confess. Where to start? It was a cold September weekend in 1979. I was working at the Sheraton in Birmingham as a porter. I like to port. I've always been very good at ferrying things from one end of a corridor to another. Anyway, that particular weekend, the Harrison Ford fan club of England, Scotland and of course Wales was having you'd call it a convention or a con now. Back then it was more of a get-together. Of course, the thing that the Harrison Ford fan club lacked was a Harrison Ford. So, for some reason, the guest of honour was his accountant, who can be relied on to have at least touched Mr. Ford at least once, and maybe on the hand. Perhaps they had a hug. I understand he was French, so they may even have kissed. On the cheeks, of course. Probably. Anyway, he knew the man, and it was as close as the fans were getting. Anyway, the thing is, he cancelled. The poor man had heard about Birmingham's famous Curry Mile and decided to experiment. Well, you can predict what happened next. He ended up, as he would have said, dans la merde. And that was where I stepped in. I didn't mean to. It's just that I get terribly, terribly embarrassed. And when you catch me in a lie, I just find it's easier to keep plugging away. It's amazing, really. You start with one silly, ridiculous lie, and provided you stick with it, it becomes the truth of sorts. And that's what my life has been. One moment of silliness and bluntness, and suddenly I am the guest of honour at the world's first gathering of Harrison Ford groupies. And it's all just, escalated from there. And now you probably know me as the Stormtrooper who bangs his head in the science fiction motion picture Star Wars. You might have seen me in a documentary or two, or possibly at a convention somewhere in the world. I have, however, a terrible confession to make. My name is Gerard Fish, and I have never been in Star Wars. What's that little red light mean? Oh, saints preserve us. Right, let's just get this thing steady. Marvellous. Where was I? Oh yes, my name is Gerard Fish, the bloke who once played a Stormtrooper in Star Wars. But I've been lying to you. You see, the thing you have to realise about me is that I am a rather splendid liar. And it's amazing what happens when you tell the wrong lie to the right person. So where was I? Oh yes, the 1979 Harrison Ford fan gathering thingy. So, all these lovely young women had come to Birmingham to be excited about Mr. Ford, and their guest of honour was inconvenienced somewhere on the ring road. Anyway, this meant that the hotel was filled with rather desperate-looking fans, all of whom had travelled pretty far to find out more about their idol. Certainly they had a lot of luggage. You notice that when you're a porter. The thing with that hotel at the time was that they were remodelling. They do like to model and remodel these things, and some of the doors have been lowered. I kept banging my head on the new door frames, and there was a lot of them. I was carrying for some lovely young American lady, and after the third time I collided with the door, she asked me if I did that a lot. I said it was something that happened to me all the time, just as I near concussed myself for the fourth time. Well, at that she simply couldn't stop laughing. She said I was like that Stormtrooper from Star Wars. And I have to say, I don't know if I was just angry or simply concussed, but I snapped back and said, well, that was me as well, and stormed off, leaving the poor woman's bags in the foyer. I went to cool down and have a cup of tea, and then resolved to find the woman and apologise before she reported me to the management. Well, just as I headed out, she saw me, and I thought, this is it, Gerard. This is the end of the line for you. She had a horde with, you see, and they looked very emotional. But rather than yell at me for being rude, they all started asking me questions. Honestly, At the time, I didn't even know who Harrison Ford was. I thought they were asking about Ford motor cars. Well, my brother was a dealer, you see. By the time I realised my mistake, it was too late. They wanted to know everything about me. As I started to realise what I'd done wrong, they were asking me to talk at their convention. It seemed rude, not? That red light's flashing again. You'd have thought these things would have come with charged batteries. Oh, marvellous. It works when you just plug it in. The wonders of modern technology. Now, if I can just keep it steady. There we go. So, where was I? Oh, yes. My first ever convention just sort of happened. They were just so pleased to meet a Stormtrooper and someone who may have breathed the same air as their idol that it just sort of happened. Did I mention I was a gardener as well as a porter? A handyman in general, really. Lots of hard work, but you sort of let your hands get on with it. Lots of time to think about the clouds. I mean, I did act, but nothing special. Anyway, I'd gone down a storm with the ladies of the Harrison Ford fan club, and one of them, Marjorie was her name, insisted on giving me a fee. I was terribly impressed, and of course I felt a fraud, but it seemed rude not to. So I swore to myself I'd never do it again. I mean, what were the chances? Well, quite a lot as it turns out. I mean, the first time lovely Marjorie called, I said no. They were putting together some sort of convention-like thing. Would I like to be on a panel with Howard Chaykin and some bloke called Stanley about Marvel Star Wars comics or something? Well, I just felt it would have been too much. The joke had gone on quite long enough. Well, she was lovely about it, but I had to say no. And then Marjorie called again, and this time it was something or other in Boston. I said no at first, but then the roof of my house fell in, so I said yes. The hotel was another Sheraton, of course, with the same blasted redesign. Oh, my poor head. I still couldn't get used to those doors, and they just sort of assumed I was that Stormtrooper. It was very thrilling, but also terribly embarrassing. So there I was, sitting on a stool in front of lots of lovely people, some of whom were very intense, and others who had some sort of allergy to soap. But still lovely. A tribe, I think they called it, my tribe, until, of course, they asked me questions. Well, I'd never been on set, so I just sort of made it up. Called George Lucas Georgie Porgy, that sort of thing. Of course, they were scandalised. Didn't I want to work with the great Mr. Lucas again, they asked? Not really. Not really at all. Happy to poke fun at the man. Of course, I never met him. Someone with a beard like that unkempt shouldn't be allowed near a camera. You never know what things might climb out of his chest hair and put you off. Then, they asked me if I knew what Alec Guinness was like. I was shocked. I never even knew he was in the movie. But curiously, in one of those small world moments, I actually did know Alec. I used to prune his petunias back when he lived in Croydon, treading the boards doing Lear 5 nights a week. Lovely man. Hated science fiction. Hang on. Have I turned the blasted camera on? Oh, bugger, let me... Well, that was embarrassing. I thought I'd turned it off by mistake. But I have a clicky thing now. Where was I? Oh, yes. I mean, seriously, how can anyone ever have been fooled? I'm a little short for a Stormtrooper. But due to the fact that I'm horrendously dishonest and simply can't stop fibbing rather than admit the fact that my mouth runs around the world before my brain has even had a chance to wake up, I became this sort of celeb, the rebel Stormtrooper, the one they didn't invite back and refused to acknowledge even existed. After that, it sort of became a thing. Mr. Lucas kept telling people he didn't know who I was, and of course that just made it worse. I feel bad about playing the victim, but it was such a good role, and I've only ever done amateur dramatics before. The other actors on the convention circuit scorned me, of course. Ever been scorned by an Ewok? It's not nice. I got kicked in the crotch by an alien dancing girl once as well. I never did find out what that was about. Of course, the fans loved me. I was always willing to talk rubbish, and they always wanted to hear it. There was a campaign of sorts to get me into those terrible prequel movies. There's even a theory on the internet that I'm secretly Jar Jar Binks. And perhaps I am. Of course, I just want to confirm right now that I'm definitely not. With this hair? Certainly not. Don't be silly. But you can only be a pariah for so long. After the prequels, all of us old convention circuit types were a bit worried. I mean, I only ever did it for the odd bit of beer money, but still, those films were so bad. No one likes Sand, George. No one. There's no need to make a bloody movie about it. But even though the prequels were terrible, the fans still loved us. They even loved me, the old fraud. But now, I have to confess, it's all over. I just can't lie to my fans anymore. I have never been in Star Wars. Now, Star Trek, on the other hand,